Welcome back to the Connected podcast. I'm thrilled to bring you an extraordinary collection in which some incredible students take the driver's seat and host dynamic conversations with professionals from across the higher education sector, discussing the vital topic of student belonging. We're back today with Louise Salter, who's hosting a conversation with Jane Bartholomew, an educational consultant. Jane has many years' experience in higher education and is particularly interested in improving the quality and enhancement of students' experience as it relates to their personal and professional development. Jane shares some of the tools she has developed with a particular focus on her taxonomy of self, the motivated undergraduate student.
So you seem to have had a really varied career, which started in the textiles industry. How did you end up in education? And more specifically, what motivated you to write your thesis about student engagement and motivation in higher education?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me. I'm glad you're interested in the taxonomy, and I'll tell you a little bit about that as we go along. But to begin with, I just want to highlight the fact that when I was a young person with parents who were what we would all call very academic, I literally had a rocket scientist for a father and a mother who was steeped in English history and languages. And there was me wanting to experience everything and play and create and draw and become very excited by doing and making.
Not science necessarily.
And not science particularly. And it was all about, it was a fascinating time really, because as I grew older, from about the age of 3, I was interested in these sorts of playing and doing things and creating little schools and doing all sorts of strange things like that. I'll come back to the education link in a minute. But I did find that I was being measured in some ways. Well, by your age, I was reading all of the blah, blah books. And at this stage, Jane, these things were happening in my young life. And they didn't really mean to do that because they were very supportive of my creative self. But I was definitely different to them and my brother. And I realized very early on that it was all of that doing and making and visualizing things and bringing things to life in my own mindset increased my motivation. And I went on from there really all the way through my studies. I did get excited in the chemistry lab when I watched the materials interact. I did have interest in some elements of maths like trigonometry because I could make sense of the visual. But everything else became a little bit like, what's the point? And I think that's what drove my interest in design. So I then went on to do a textile design degree, and I became very excited by the very complex construction of woven textiles, and that excited me hugely. And it wasn't long before I realized I could actually help my peers collaborate, work together and support them out in working out the technicalities of all of that stuff, and that inspired me hugely. So that's the beginnings of my educational sort of background that inspired my choices as a textile designer. And along the way, I spotted and saw and experienced different teaching styles. At school, it was very rote delivered, a lot of it. There were experiments to do, but it was very rote delivered. And I remember thinking and daydreaming, and I would have comments like that at my, I think where the parents were involved and, oh, you seem to be daydreaming a lot, Jane. Well, it's because it wasn't going in, because it wasn't the way I learned. And I realized early on, I was just a really different way of learning that I was about. But and then during the degree, I experienced some fantastic pedagogies. And I'm going to use that word early on here because I realized that once I became a lecturer in textile design and I had completed my postgraduate certificate in higher education, the light bulb went on and I realized there were so many different ways of learning and teaching and deciding on the types of pedagogies that you might use for different situations, that became the exciting driver. And I think that's why immediately, even though I was in textile design lecturing, I was switched on to the learning and teaching mode, which meant that I could see how students were learning, the best ways in which to create an environment where they might fail and struggle and collaborate and challenged themselves to begin to open up that debate about what motivates students to learn. And little did I know how important that was at 29. And that has driven me on and on and on in my educational endeavours. In terms of it connecting, so that's how I got into education, I suppose, because I started to do things like work collaboratively as the quality manager in an art and design school. I worked collaboratively with the learning and teaching manager. In fact, I would be forever being very nosy and wanting to do things in that corner too. And I would go out and share my experiences with other colleagues in other institutions about peer learning, for example, about collaborative learning, about the relevance and importance of experiential learning, and not just the stuff where you go out into the industry and you experience it there, but the stuff in-house where students come together and build a sense of belonging, weirdly, build a sense of community. And the design education world is founded on that. And so by leaving design and later on in life going across to the business management and marketing department, I was suddenly faced with students that were really struggling to feel like they did belong and that they were part of something. And it was this whole extra sort of way of considering how other disciplines taught that made me realise that I needed to go back to the doctorate and think again about, wow, I've come from a background that actually instills in people that sense of belonging. I felt part of a community. This was a really big ethos in the way that we were as students and as staff. And then I realised that in some other departments and other disciplines, it wasn't the same.
Okay.
And that sparked a whole series of investigations that fed into my doctoral research.
Wow. So there were people daydreaming in the business and marketing school because they weren't quite so engaged as.
Yeah, absolutely. I
Lots of
came across
daydreaming.
it. Yes, and in a very large course. For example, I was teaching on a course with about 450, 500 students on it. And within a module sense, I was being given materials to deliver. And I thought, right, well, the students are going to sit there for an hour and a half and I'm going to talk at them.
Yeah.
So I didn't. So I would immediately not switch on those slides and I would pull out beforehand. I'd know what I was going to do to break up the hour and a half into 4 activities with, knowledge-based learning going alongside. They obviously want to make notes. That's what they've been trained to do at school. They wrote their notes, then they deliver it back. Very formal rote teaching. That's the way their brains have been trained to learn, which is another problem. But it did expose for me that I needed a mixture of things going on. So immediately I wouldn't launch my session with a set of slides open to them and reading them information or talking things through with them that was on screen. I would immediately give them a problem to solve. And the first problem would last approximately 20 minutes. I'd put them into pairs or threes. I'd make sure they'd mix up in their groups. And I would give them things that were really tricky and awkward to find. And they would have to solve a problem and give an example of the industry, an industry related example about a particular issue or a concept. And then I wouldn't tell them this at the beginning, I'm a bit cruel. I would then make them present their findings to all and make them stand up.
Yeah. There's some responsibility in that, isn't there? They've got to be present and accountable to do that. Yeah.
Exactly. So they'd have to immediately think, oh, right, yeah, but I don't, oh, no, I can't, and I don't, and I'm not ready. And I said, oh, but don't worry, it's fine. This isn't important. This is just having a go. I said, you're here in higher education now. I'm interested in getting you ready for the world of work. And what you need for readiness for the world of work is your ability to build your confidence. We're doing that today. We're on the one step only. You're just going to have a go. You're all in agreement here, aren't you, everybody? This is a collaborative learning environment. You're just going to try it. Is anybody feeling confident? There'll be no hands raised. I said, see, everybody's in the same boat. So we'd start like that, and then they would still come to my sessions week on week on week on week, even though the knowledge bit of it is all delivered really, and they can get it online if they want. They would still come to my sessions because they knew that they were getting an added extra bonus here, if you like, by me working with their ability to build their confidence, encourage them to be, sort of experimental in the way they researched, and start to get a little bit more directional and decisive about how things are in the world out there and how it influences who they could be in that world next, as they graduate.
Yeah.
So all of that was from day one. I used to scare them, but then they got to like me.
I was thinking I would have been scared for
Well,
sure.
we were all scared, but unless
Got to
we,
scare yourself though, haven't
if
you?
we're not ready for, interviews, and we're not able to articulate our thoughts. And the other scary thing for them, bless them, was the fact that, as first years, I've noticed this over the last 5 years, the first years will make their notes on their phone and they'll want to get up and read. And I said, no, 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 it's okay. You don't need your phones. You better have written it all out. I said, yeah, but you're not going to, this isn't a reading exercise. This isn't you. I'm not interested in your ability to read. I want you to just have a go, have a think. Just have a think and say whatever. And also, there's 3 of you, so help each other out. And so that's how it started. Moving into the other departments.
So could you tell us about the taxonomy of self and how the framework was developed?
Yes, the doctorate ran alongside a couple of job changes, and therefore I decided to slow it down and let it take its time, because I took some gaps in that journey for a number of reasons: personal reasons, work reasons. Very, very busy with my jobs. It was very much confined to holidays and weekends, and so it was tiring, So yeah, it did take a long time, number of years, 9 years, I think it took me from start to finish, which will scare everybody from doing one, but it was worthwhile, because all the little bits of the jigsaw that came along those 9 years drip fed their way into the research. And I suppose what I found was the differences in the disciplines, moving from, if you can imagine, I started my doctorate in education something like the end of 2013. And in 2018, I moved departments from art and design, my whole life, my whole background, my whole self, if you like, my own development of me, all the way to business management and marketing. Quite a switch. And it was there that I recognized these huge differences in the ways people were teaching and learning. So I had to go back around and work out, wait a minute, what's happening here? So I did a lot of research on that, and that fed the next flavors of the research. I also, quite late on, around 21, if I finished in 22, it's about 2021, I also hit upon the fact that there was some psychological developments that I was passionate about, the development of a young person. And I started to read much more in depth about the psychological development of an adolescent to a young adult. Now, I've been a mature student. I know many other mature students, but if we think about the majority of students, they come to university around 18, 19, they leave around 20, 21 to 23, something like that.
Quite a developmental stage, isn't it?
It's crucial, and it's actually classed as adolescent. And we, as lecturers and the institutions out there, and the way that we have in society, have labelled 18-year-olds as adults, imply that they are adults. But in psychological terms,
ready to go.
They're not.
No.
So they are just not ready for that yet. So 18, they're adolescent, and they are needing to develop self-awareness, independence, and become, fingers crossed, hopefully autonomous by the time they reach the end of their degree, to be ready for their decision making for their futures. So this was something that really sparked my taxonomy, because I realized that was the continuum that I was working on. I was working on that continuum that helped let's be very organized and systematic about this. Let's say the first years need to become self-aware. They need to begin to understand who they are, accept and acknowledge their backgrounds, like I did in the beginning of this, relaying my story from when I was younger. I needed to accept and understand who I was in my journey. And that's part of the doctorate's reflective practice that we do. So that was really interesting for me. And I thought that's what I need the students to be able to do. They need to be able to say, this is who I am, and this is what I'm good at. And these are the areas that I need to improve on. And I think in higher education generally, we're all pretty good at understanding that goals need to be set. But it's how that's done and how students explore them, the development of themselves and their growth. It depends on who you've got in front of you talking to you about this, or whether it's a formal thing in a module, or whether it's a one-to-one tutoring session, or maybe it has never happened and they've never really thought about it and they're just going through the motions of getting their degree. So these self-awareness tools are really important. So is then, for me, the taxonomy moves into sort of a dotted line between first year and second year, because no student is the same.
Yeah.
And it's really about then the independence. How do you begin to become independent, accept who you are, know yourself that little bit more, and feel free enough to be able to experiment and dabble and try new things, and consider what you're enjoying and perhaps develop some enthusiasm for those things. And you'll hear some key words coming out in what I'm saying here, because that aligns with the way the taxonomy is being organised. And then heading towards final year, wouldn't it be lovely if every undergraduate left as an autonomous person and felt very driven, determined, decisive about a number of things, their personal selves, who they are, what they want, maybe not a clear aspiration of everything that they're seeing in their future, but some reach there, something that's tangible, doable, achievable, that they're feeling launched.
Yeah.
My own research, not that it's quantitatively supported, but my own research, my own understanding, having taught thousands and thousands of students, I would estimate that to be about 15% of students leave university as truly autonomous in the worlds I've been in. I think many get firsts, clearly, and achieve fantastic degrees, but then don't know
Not the same
who
thing,
they
is it?
are,
Yeah.
or what they are, or who they could be, and how are they going to contribute to society, to the global agendas, be the next generation of leaders of this world. I felt more ready when I finished my degree than I know my students feel today. So there has been a massive change in higher education, brought on by a variety of factors, external, obviously, and that is actually affecting how young people are, I suppose, engaging with their degree. They have been led since they were about 4 or 5 to be grade chasing.
Yes.
That's first and foremost in their mind. Doesn't matter what you say to them. Oh yeah, but I only want a first. Yes, I know that, Jane, but at the end of the day, I just want a first. Yes, but what about all the experiences that are going to give you the richness of competencies, skills, and attributes that you can talk up at interview? Yeah, but I've just got to get that first. So we have these debates, and I can see that, around me in higher education over the years, and the shift is massive. They're buying their degrees. They don't say it like that. We know their customers. Some of them feel like customers, depends how cross and grumpy they get about something, but generally speaking, they're still fairly empty vessels wanting to be filled with knowledge, because that's how they've been taught to be at school. I'm sorry to be generalist. I know there's some brilliant sparky ones out there, and they are fantastic, but the drive often does come later in the degree, and they're the ones that leave as autonomous beings ready for that future. So those are important things for me that I hope helps answer that question a little bit more broadly. I'm very interested in what the taxonomy can do next. It is being used in 2 different ways right now. I don't know if you want me to talk about that, or maybe we cover that towards the end of this podcast. But I think it's very intriguing. I'll just give you a sense of that. The first version of it was all about the course teams actually using it as a system to be able to assist them to consider their course design, to see if actually the competencies, skills, and attributes that they could be nurturing in every single individual student is embedded in the way that the course is taught.
Right.
And isn't left to chance.
Yeah.
Isn't about extracurricular activities. We're facing a very massive problem in student society, where absolutely they can't just give up their spare time. They don't really have spare time. They're all working hard to earn some money to pay for their accommodation. They're all busy with other aspects of their lives. Many are now travelling in to university rather than spending a lot more money on the accommodation, etc. So there's a varied set of different ways of approaching higher education now as a student compared to how it was 30 years ago in my day. And we have to respect all of that. So to think that, oh, well, yes, go and join some societies and go on these trips, I think is very luxurious, and only certain students can actually do that. So when there's conversations around developing perhaps a sense of belonging and thinking about, community building, and oh yeah, they'll do that through their trips and the other field trips that we've set up for them, and then some can't go. I question that inclusive initiative, whether it is really inclusive. So I suppose what I'm about is making sure that all of the things that I believe that young people need to develop as adults should be embedded within the course. So the taxonomy offers the staff team, the universities, department heads, and the individual lecturer to check themselves over to see if the content and the delivery style actually supports the development of these essential competencies. The other quick option is to be used in advising and academic tutoring situations on a one-to-one basis. And this is something I've trialed myself, whereby the taxonomy is laid in front of a student, no words from me, and they just have a read and have a little think about how it feels for them. And immediately there's this offering that comes from the student. And it could be quite a, oh my goodness, I've not arrived. I haven't got any of these things under my belt. Or it could be, oh, well, this is interesting. Oh, I can sort of see me in this, actually. And then they start talking through it.
Yeah, starts the self-awareness, I guess.
So the self-awareness kicks in, and they're reflecting on what they did in first year. And I've tried this on first years, second years, final years, and students who've recently left university. And they're looking back and they're experiencing all of these thoughts about what they're using the words that I put in the taxonomy as milestones of ways in which they've recognized in themselves that they developed or they haven't developed, or that, I think I need to work on experiential stuff next term. I should get out more. Is that what it's telling me, Jane? And I said, well, it's up to you what it's telling you. I'm just sitting back listening. It's great. The taxonomy does the work. The tutoring and the advising aspect is proving to be really exciting, and that's another way of looking at how the taxonomy can work.
Okay. So what competencies do you think students should ideally gain during their university time, and what examples can you give of how educators could instill them?
Yeah, I've been reading quite a lot recently about different approaches to considering what the future holds for young people, let's say 10 years down the line, 15 years down the line. And I'm not over focused on that. What with the move of AI and technology, there's so many things that are going to change. I'm not looking at that. I'm looking at the fundamental core skills and competencies, I think, life skills that students need. So for me, I think they need to find their what intrinsically motivates them. I think they need to determine aspects of that motivation and align it with perhaps a future goal. I don't mind if it's a next term and it's joining the football club, or whether it's something for next year, or it's something about some sort of career opportunity, or whether they feel that they want to work in the voluntary sector. Something that a light bulb goes on and they get excited, and then we can start to work backwards. So for me, if students, I mean, thinking a bit about the content of the taxonomy, if they haven't got some inner confidence beginning, I'm not saying it's a measured thing. And by the way, this taxonomy is not being developed for anybody to attempt to measure anything.
Yeah.
The worst thing we can do is pitch one student against another and do that comparison, because
kind of
that's where
point, isn't it? That
it's against the point, and it's where the poison lies, in my opinion.
Yeah.
That's why I don't like the hierarchy of the measuring culture, the metrification of higher education, the measuring culture in schools. I think it has affected our young people hugely over the last, 15 years. If somebody's at the top, how do you ever get to the top? If you're always looking to try to get to the top and you never make the top, what is that about? It's setting us up feeling like we've failed. So, that's a larger message. So the confidence building, tune into who you are. Who do you want to be? What makes you tick? What are you motivated by? So confidence, learning to collaborate, be part of something, feel it, sense it, know it, get involved, be interested in others. These sorts of empathy, sympathetic approaches, good listening skills. That's rare when they come to university. I find listening is a little bit weird. Communication, and I don't mean just verbal. I mean visually, written, all of those basic things, to get them and have those under their belt before they do much. The experimental and the enthusiasm aspect, I think, are waning, particularly experimental in many disciplines where clearly there's a really important need to be trained fully as a doctor, or as a dentist, or you're in the sciences or whatever. You've got to learn an awful lot of material. I understand that. But there's still a way in which you can ask questions and you can be experimental in the way that you are learning. And I think we don't encourage our young people to take the time out to explore how their mind might work. If I said, get creative with this, they're like, I'm going to do what? What do you mean? What do you mean?
Yeah.
They can't see it or feel it. And I think that's a bit lost in education at the minute. And experiences, crucial. They've got to go out and challenge themselves. They've got to experiment, and sometimes fail to learn. How long does it take a young toddler to walk? They fall and fall and fall and fall and fall, and that's how they learn. And I think that aspect of teaching approaches has been lost, because we want them to succeed.
We're quite scared to fail, aren't we, really? We're all a bit
nervous. Yeah, we're frightened to fail because it affects our rankings, in the university sector. Staff are frightened to fail because they want their grades to be the same as the other person teaching on the same unit or module as you. There's a whole fear factor running right through the sector, which I believe fully affects how students then can't take risks and play and explore. I also think some of the modular aspects and tight units, we have in design education, we worked hard to have 100 credit point module, 120 credit point module, 80 credit, massive year-long experiential learning. You develop, there was plenty of moments within the education stages of a whole year-long module where you were checked in upon and you had formative feedback, and that was just the time you played. You did your thing, and every student did it differently. Every single student set themselves on a different path of investigation all the way through the year, but that was okay. Whereas nowadays you've got short, dare I call them short fat modules or long thin modules, and they're all running alongside each other, and it's all stressful, and basically they're going to get 2 assignments, they've got to submit them all, and so they're just out there regurgitating what they've heard. And there is no playtime in there. There's no experimental time, in my opinion. In my opinion of the experiences I've had. So those sorts of things are quite intriguing as well. So I would like, you know, at the end of the day, I think intrinsic motivation leads to decisive, directional and determined students, you know, who know who they are and what they want. Therefore, they've become a bit more self-aware, independent, and autonomous.
I see that.
Okay.
So do you think motivation also increases the student's sense of belonging when they're at university?
It's a tricky one, this, isn't it? Because the sense of belonging, it, you know, involves a range of things for me, and I obviously research this quite a lot. But I see it, for me, there are many ways in which you can decide what a sense of belonging could mean. But for me, it's about fundamental human need. How are we developing that fundamental human need of feeling like we belong? And I think education plays an enormous part in that. But at the same time, I think the experiences and all the competencies I've just referred to ensure that the student absolutely starts to develop self-awareness, which is to be understanding themselves in relation to the world or others. And I think it's that fundamental human need to be able to belong, that, you know, you're part of something. There's social interactions all around you. You're fully aware of your own identity within that social space, and you feel comfortable. You know, I just think we've got to strive, and it's complex. You know, we have a very multicultural, fantastically rich multicultural experience in higher education now, for all, for staff, for students, and that's something that we all embrace and we want to get right. But actually, if the individual has that internal wish and want to be part of something and not feel, oh yeah, but my background's different and I'm over here because I think this. And there is a little of that in some communities as well. And I'm going to stay with the people that I know and understand who have the same beliefs and experiences and backgrounds as me. And there is some of that as well that we have to grapple with. But at the end of the day, if the individual has some of that self-awareness and has been brought into an environment where they can share that safely and in comfort for their own sake and for that of others, and to also inspire others to understand different cultures, I think that brings with it belonging and a sense of, and it comes from internal motivations, I think, to want to be part of something. So it's all bound together for me.
Yeah, I can see that. No, I can see that. I think it's about sort of having that self-identity that allows you to kind of carry yourself. You know, you know who you are and you can be that person amongst everyone else.
Yes, and even in design practice, I taught some amazingly inspiring students who didn't want to stay on the very tight sort of directive of a particular inquiry, and wanted to try something different. And I would always be there and saying, you must do that. You must do what you want to do. Oh yeah, but it doesn't fit quite. We'll make it fit. I would always say that. I've got students from 20 odd years ago who actually still get in touch occasionally and say, I remember you saying, just do it anyway. Don't worry, we'll make it fit. And a couple of them have gone on to be lecturers and professors, and they used the way I taught them to think differently and not be scared and worried. And they now use that in their lectures and their, I'm fascinated by that.
So that's the proof it worked for them.
Really felt, yes, it worked for them. And they said, if you hadn't said that to me then, I don't think I'd be who I am today. Because I wouldn't have developed that work, and I wouldn't have been that, you know, infamous.
Had that courage, that mindset.
And my work wouldn't be where it is now, and I wouldn't be a professor. And I'm thinking, I've made a difference.
That sort of pivotal moment in time. Amazing. So the concept of the taxonomy of self, it's still quite new. You did talk about it briefly, but can you measure its impact in terms of enhancing student motivation?
Yes, I think I can. Well, what I'd like to say at the moment is that I've had since finishing my full-time roles at NTU in October last year in 24, I knew I was going down this road and wanting to set up an educational consultancy. And I've had all this fantastic, rich stuff and these wonderful new tools coming out of the doctoral research, and I really wanted to do more with it. And I'd been sitting on them for a year, tied to my desk working silly hours, as you can appreciate in the sector, and realizing that they were just going to waste. So it was a fantastic opportunity for me to think, right, what am I going to do? So what I did was I started applying to lots of different conferences, and I've had it accepted at every single one, which is
Amazing.
which is amazing and
Yeah.
fantastic. But they're all coming at once. No, it's not too bad. I've got four, and within a couple of months, and I'm very excited by them all. And in the first one, the UCAT conference, the UK Advising and Tutoring Conference, which was held in London last month, I had great attendance at my first showing of the taxonomy of self, the slightly newly tweaked version from the version that's in my thesis from 2022.
Okay.
Because obviously I trialed it with a few people and did some internal workshops at various universities and just got some feedback. And I thought, I know I need to tweak a few things. So at that particular conference, I actually had the opportunity to sort of launch it properly within that sector to get the tutors to think a bit about using the tool to explore with students. Who are you? Who do you want to be? What are you thinking when you look at this? What does it make you want to develop next about you? And 14 different lecturers from 14 different institutions took a copy of the taxonomy, gave me their email address, and they're going to trial it for me.
Fantastic.
I know, it's the best thing ever, which means that I wish I could say right now this is the result, but I haven't got there. So basically, after this term is finished, I get in touch with them all again and I ask them, how did it go? What happened? Tell me a bit about your experiences. So the qualitative analysis of what I asked them for will be done over the summer, but I'm very intrigued because literally their disciplines were so different as well. And that's going to give it the reach that I really wanted to have.
Yeah.
And it couldn't be bigger or better than that for me at this point. So I was delighted to be able to sort of do that. And it came at me at that time. And I just suddenly thought, just before my session, I thought, I know what I can do. I can say you can have a copy of it if you give me your email. And then win-win. Yeah. And also I need that kudos, obviously, not only of having my research go out into other institutions, but, they can photocopy it. I gave them a physical copy, obviously, printed copy, but they can go photocopy it. They can look at my website. They can use the tool. I'm not worried about that. But
you need to know how
I
it
need
works.
to know about
definitely.
the impact in different disciplines. That would be an amazing thing to achieve.
How exciting. Maybe this podcast will happen again next year and you can come back and tell everyone. Give us an update.
I'd love to do that. Yeah.
So what are you planning to do next with your work?
Well, there's two sides to the work, and I didn't really make a brilliant first connection at the start of this with the pedagogy work that I'm also doing. I'm really excited to tell everybody that I've got actually a pedagogy action card game, which the Advanced HE conference is actually accepting as a paper this year. And I'll be running it as a workshop. So that's in early July, which is great. And I've run it before at a couple of other institutions for their learning and teaching events, just popping along and running a workshop. Now, the pedagogy, I think is key, like I said earlier on in this podcast, the pedagogic choices that people make are the starting point for what I'm talking about and driving an agenda where the taxonomy is used more effectively to review course design.
Starts with the educator. And
it does.
Self-awareness.
So I want to be doing staff development workshops. I want to be training staff to be able to use the pedagogy action card game and work with the taxonomy to reevaluate who they are as educators in order to put them on their own sort of self-driven, determined, continuum of development that gets them to see that the students' learning and their students' ways of thinking should come first. When we were students, we were different. Our students are coming year on year different. And I think what we have to do is embrace how our students are thinking and operating and work with them to make sure that we can connect with them well, to inspire their sense of belonging and also to increase their intrinsic motivation to be who they want to be through competency acquisition.
Wow, brilliant. Well, Jane, it's been a pleasure to talk to you about your work in student motivation and belonging. Thank you for talking to me today.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Connected podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please check out the rest of our extraordinary Voices of Belonging collection and stay connected.